All right, so last time we were going through the file structure of the new app that we just exported, right? And I kind of touched on what some of these files are, but I wanted to touch on just a couple more files that'll be important to us, and that is not these files. That is these files. So there's a couple more here. If you come into, come on. All right. If you come into the app itself, or we came down into the app here, and then we're going to go into where the functions are actually located. But we're going to go into the util section. We've got a couple of files here. The first file is the config file. So when you're in an app like this and you are trying to determine what kind of configuration you're going to need, the config file here, the way that this is built out is actually by the config section over here. So by default, everything has this section here, the resilient section, right? And that'll be built in by default. But if you're also wanting to supply anything for your app, you can actually define that all right here. So right now this says that there's no config data. Well, what we could do is we could come in here and we could actually comment this out and come down here and uncomment this section down here. And then in between these
What's that thing? Or multi-line comments or something like that?
yeah, yep. So in between those, we can actually start defining what our settings are. So if we needed to have an API, we could add, API key or something like that. If you've got a URL, you can add that, and just keep going one line at a time here, just to define any configurations that you might need over here. And then that'll allow you to build that out. So that's definitely an important one to touch on.
So, quick question.
Yes, sir.
Then essentially it's just the XXX. If you were to set one, we could set it to none, just so, or it now be fine for if like for an API key, and we need to the end user needs to set it within resilient.
Yeah. So
Okay. It doesn't need like an actual like.
yeah. So filling out like XXX is kind of like put your thing here. I know that some people have put like this your key here kind of thing. So you can do different things like that. You can notate it however you want, but this is just going to be the generic one that's populated here, so that when you're done and you're ready to come in and edit this, or when you've installed it and you're coming in here to edit this, this is going to be where this generic script is, or this generic configuration is going to be stored. So then this is where you're going to come in and it looks like the base URL for this was already added. But maybe this is for more of an on-prem system and you've got, you're just telling them, hey, put your server name here kind of thing. So you can do that. Next section is the customized one. Now this one, I don't think that I really do anything with. But if you come in here, you can actually see where we ran the code gen, and we defined, what was in each one of the, or, what we're actually polling. So you've got your package, your destination, functions, workflows, all the things that we defined in that script that we used last time. It puts all that stuff in here so that it can keep track of what is part of this. So when you're doing a reload, it knows what to pull back down. If you're doing a installation, it knows what we're adding to the instance here. So that information's here. Then you can also see down here that it's kind of commented in there as well. So not a lot. I don't believe that there's a lot to do with this one here, but wanted to demonstrate this information for you here. And then now this is one that I don't have notated on. This is something that we've had in the system, but this is something that when you start publishing the apps or sending them to us to be published, we're going to start requiring this. Actually, I think we already do require this. But this is the self-test script. Essentially, there's more to this than this being the only script. But when you come down here and you select the test config, this is kind of what it's going to kick off to start to do that test. Now, in here, we've got the test section here where it's going to run these tests to actually test out your script. This is where I was mentioning I don't have any documentation on this right now. I'm still trying to figure this part out myself. But in here is where you can actually build your test script on what you want to test to make sure is connecting that your app is going to require. So you can build, your mock results and your expected results, so that when it does the test, it comes back and those two things will have to match for it to be able to continue on. So that could be, verifying login, checking to see if your login was a success kind of thing. So you can build that out in here, but this is something that I don't have a lot of experience with, so I'm not going to touch a lot on it. So same with the tests. That's kind of where these payload samples are going to be coming from. That's part of the testing, and yeah, so that's something that I definitely need to learn more about and build out, and I can potentially do another video once I have that knowledge. But yeah, so those are kind of the files that we needed to touch on here. Um, there, the last file we're going to go into, instead of going to the utils here, we're actually going to go into the components. And like I said, this is where that function is. So if you had exported multiple functions, you're going to see multiple scripts in here that it's going to be able to run. So since we only exported the one function, we're just going to go ahead and grab this one, and we'll open this in Notepad as well. And in here is where the magic's going to happen. So essentially, you're going to build this function out here to define what you're wanting to run. So now I'm not really going to touch too much on this and exactly how to build this out, because this is kind of to each your own kind of thing. When you build out your integration, this is where you're going to be building it out. And yeah, you put your code in here. It gives you some samples on if you want to validate fields, or if you want to verify, additional or not additional, but optional inputs. And kind of laying that out. Information if you're wanting to log something. You can also do things like you need to build the REST client. We went through earlier and we actually showed you how to build the REST client. But within the function itself, it actually has its own REST client. You just have to define it here as being your REST client. So just go ahead and name that as REST client there. And then you can do the same thing that we were doing before, where that client can do your gets, like right here. It can do your gets, your get puts, your posts, whatever you need to do. That client's going to be able to do that for you. So then down in the section down here is where you can actually put your information. Oh, and of course, if you've got an error that happens within your code, you can raise that so that your errors happen gracefully and don't crash the entire program. Down here, this is where you can start to define your code here. So you lay out your code down here, and then at the very bottom down here, you have to define what your results are going to be. So your results have to be in a dictionary. And essentially, when you pass these results back here, you're going to pass the results back, like I said, in a dictionary form, but then that dictionary is going to be appended to another dictionary. So what you are handing back right here isn't going to be the same results that you are interacting with within the code within, let's see within your post process script. So we go into the into a function here, and we go into the post process script. And right here, you see that that we've got the results here. That's not quite the same results. So essentially, what happens is the results that you hand back to it actually get posted as the results content. And then there's additional information that gets added, such as the result success. The I don't remember what all is included in it off the top of my head, but there's additional information that the results get added to. And if you're wanting the content that you are passing back, then you're going to look for the key content in your results dictionary. All right, so yeah, so that's kind of how you're going to structure this. So we've kind of laid out here where we describe, okay, put your function here, put your code here. Here's some examples. So we've got this kind of laid out so that you know exactly where you're supposed to be putting your code. Um, I'm not sure why we've got yield results down here, or the yield functional results down here when it's already defined down here. So normally I just ignore this. Um, but yeah, so everything down here should be good. Just erase this kind of thing, build your code in there, and then, pass it the results that you want. The way that I typically do this is I've already defined the results by the time I'm ready, or I've already defined that dictionary. So I just go ahead and put in the dictionary right there instead of building the dictionary there, if that makes sense. So that kind of describes how to build out your code. And like I said, I'm not going to dive too deep into that because to each your own on that one. You guys can just determine what your code should be for that based on, the integration that you're building. After you build out your code here, at that point, it's kind of ready to go ahead and install the integration and start testing it to make sure that everything's working. Now, because in this instance, I have not actually done anything here, or not actually built out an integration, what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump over to another integration that I built while I was working at Ohio State. And that's this FN relations. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is in the FN relations, you're going to need the distribution files here. So the way that we're going to do that is by packaging the application up. So the way that we do that is actually by going in and using the commands resilient, oops, SDK, and then package, and then we're going to define what we're packaging. So P for package, and then the app name here. And essentially what this is we're actually defining this right here, because we're sitting in this level. We're just defining this. This is where our app is. So this entire structure that was built when we did that export. So we put that all in and we hit package. And it's cool. This worked even though I didn't add any code. Now it's throwing some warnings down here. And again, that's because I haven't actually built out this code. But things like the icons, changing the icons and stuff like that, that's what it's coming down here and going, oh, you haven't changed these things. You haven't done this stuff. Part of that testing stuff, that writing the test scripts, is the -- validate. And essentially that's a flag you can add on the end of that command that we just ran that will allow you to run all the validation checks, and it'll tell you if there's anything wrong. You're going to want to do that before you hand it to IBM through the App Exchange, to verify if there's anything wrong with the app before you push it up to us. And this actually will help you resolve a lot of problems before you hand it to us, and that way there's not a lot of communication going back and forth of, hey, you need to fix this before we can do anything with it, and re-upload this and re-upload that, and just all the patching information that we're going to go over with you. So you can read through these as you build your code out, and it'll tell you if all of the warnings or anything else that you can try to do to resolve those issues. Now that we have the distribution here, oops, right here.
I have a quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
So, we're building a custom app. These apps can run as long or as short as we essentially try to make them, right? So if we have let's say we wanted to build an app that generated some type of report, but it was like a long running report, right? As long as we knew how to code that into the app, Resilient in and of itself wouldn't care until it comes down to the app finishing and then just sending that result back, right? Resilient's not going to like impose any type of timeouts on how long these apps run, quote unquote.
I think that there is a timeout limit, but I think it's like if it fails or if it doesn't respond within 24 hours or something like that, then is when it fails. I'm not exactly sure when that timeout limit is, but it is something that it's not it's not a short amount of time. It's not like if it doesn't complete in 5 minutes, we're instantly going to say this failed kind of thing.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good. I mean, I'm not looking for anything multi-day, but
Yeah.
but that's
Yep.
still good to know. Thanks.
Yep. So two things before we jump into the installation over here. Now that we package this up, we can actually install it as a Docker file or install the Docker container within SOAR. So I could actually come in here and install it this method. However, if you're just wanting to test it and you're just wanting to send data to a queue and just verify that it's working, um, you don't even have to package it up, actually. You can just run, first you'll have to actually install it. So you'll want to type in pip install. We'll use the -e flag on it, which is just a editable command. So you don't have to reinstall this or anything like that. If you figure out, oh, hey, this code's not working, I need to adjust this code, you can just go in, edit it, and then rerun it, and it'll work just fine. But the first thing we'll do is we'll install it. And again, we're going to define that package name as the app here. And then we'll run that. And that'll actually go through and install that application that we built. So after we install it, now what you can do is you can run resilient circuits. And as long as this is running properly. Yep, okay. So looks like we were able to connect just fine, had no problems. And you can see right down here, one of the last commands we've got is that the integration or the function that we built out did subscribe to that message destination that we had associated with it. So if you get an error here and this isn't happening, this could be why your app isn't running properly, because the message destination, it may not have been able to subscribe to it. And so there may be a problem there. That could be credentials. That could be, I think credentials will probably be the biggest one, but that would be where you would look for that information within that log. So now that this is installed and we're running resilient circuits, you can actually come in here. You don't need to install anything in here. You can try running your workflow, and you should start seeing this populate with information based on your code and stuff like that. So you'll see your errors. They'll populate in this log section here.
So what you just did was you just installed it locally to your machine, kind of like any like pip module, right? You just installed it.
Okay. Essentially what I'm doing here is I'm running resilient circuits directly on my box. And this is basically now my system that I'm running this from is acting as my own resilient circuits integration server.
Ah, okay. So it's using the other method of creating these apps
Yeah,
essentially.
exactly.
Um, so how would would you just run resilient circuits and then like uninstall or something like that? Like if you're trying to get ready to package this up.
You don't need to uninstall anything.
Okay.
The package command will still work, just because I ran that second or whatever. It doesn't matter. Essentially what you're doing is you're just installing. Uh, you're just installing the application that's in this folder. So for the FN relations one, I would just be installing this integration into Python so that Python can use this entire integration.
Okay. Cool. That
So I can still run the package against this though, and it would still create this distribution folder here with the information that we need. And you can keep those things, both of those things installed at the same time.
okay. And on top of that, when you package it up and you just like you just showed with the zip file, and you mentioned that you can just go in and install it. Like literally, I could build a custom app, go to Resilient, and actually just install it like a regular app.
Sort of, and that's what I'll get to next.
Okay.
So once you run that package file, it creates these distribution files for you, right? And this is going to be the file that you use for the old integration server. So if you had a Linux server that you're wanting to run this on, you could just go ahead and hand this over to the Linux server and install it that way. However, if you're wanting to install it as an app within the platform here, you have to grab this zip file, which contains all of those app files and stuff like that, so it knows exactly how to install it. From here, what you can do is you can actually come in and, for instance, here, we will grab the FN relations one here. So we've added this here, and we're going to hit upload. This is going to add everything that we need to run within the environment. So everything that we've built out and everything that we've done the export on earlier, it's going to put all of this into your system. So if this is a secondary system or something like that, that you're doing your testing on, that can all be done here, or that's going to all be added here, and it's going to tell you what all it's adding. So then we're going to go install. Now, what this does is this creates everything that we needed to be able to run this. Um, but this is now installed on the system, but it's not actually deployed to either of these. That is going to take a little bit more time, and we'll get into that. But for testing purposes, typically what I'll do is I will just install it here. So I know I've got all of the components that I need to run this app. And then from there, now on my system here, I would actually build the Docker container. So I'm actually going to jump to this one instead of that one, because I'm going to be doing the demo from here on out with app that's already built. So for this use case, we have now installed the package, we've done our testing, but now we want to run it in a Docker environment or in a container environment, and just verify that everything is working properly. So what we're going to actually do here is we're going to run the Docker command. We're going to specify that we want to build a container. We're going to pass it the package that we are building here. And then we are going to give this a tag. And then we're going to go ahead and call this container resilience. And then we'll call it the package name. So for instance, this one will be FN relations. And then we're going to give it a version number. So this, for instance, this version number, because I've done some edits on it, is 1.0.1. And yeah, 1.0.1 right here. Okay. Um, so this is actually going to build our container out for us, and this will take a little bit of time here while it builds that out. But this is essentially now going to create that container for us, and then we can kick that container off and provide it the configuration files that we want to use to run this file or run this container. So while this is running, do you guys have any questions?
So I guess the question is that I'd have is, so when we go to like the App Exchange and we pull down like the zip file and all that stuff, and we come over to Resilient and we click install, and it shows us here's all the thing it adds, and then we want to go through the configuration, setting it up in the app host, right? And you tell it this is the app host we want it to run. I mean, isn't that like ultimately that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like when you added that custom app in there, is it essentially just pointing to an app host and letting it just build, or do we still have to go through the process that you're showing now, building a container and then adding it like in a
So what I'm doing on the right-hand side is strictly for testing purposes.
Okay.
Uh, if you're downloading something off of the App Exchange, all of this stuff has already been done, so you don't have to do any of this stuff here. So essentially what you're going to do is when you install this, you got your configuration here. You're going to go in there. We're going to edit the app config. We're going to define these, whatever the configuration is here that we want, and then we're going to tell it which server we want it to run on. So for instance, this one, because I downloaded it, well, actually, so this one is my own custom app, and I've done some changes on this. So this currently isn't the same version that is actually running or available on the App Exchange. But if this was the one that we downloaded from the App Exchange, then all of the hash values and everything like that are already going to be in the container registry that this is associated with. So what you would be able to do is you're going to say, okay, I just want to connect this to IBM's container registry here, the app host that's running their container registry. And I'm going to go ahead and test and configure and then push these changes once I've confirmed that, and I would be good to go to actually come over here and deploy it. But then this container, setting up this container, running this container will happen, but it all happens in the background. You don't have to do anything as it pushes this over to the app host.
Okay, because I'm trying to figure out. I'm like, do I really need to go through the process of like standing up, like using our GitLab, and because I'm trying to figure out how does the GitLab and the private repository fit into all of this? Like, if I can just have like another app host and private apps, and then just install it and it goes and runs.
Yep, and that's what I mentioned earlier, that actually deploying an app, like I said, I installed this FN Relations, but it's not ready to be deployed because I haven't tested it, right? So this, I'm saying that this is an app I just finished building. I know that this one is going to work because I've already built this out. I've already done all this testing, but for this instance, I'm acting like this is the app that we just built. So what I'm going to be saying here is this isn't ready to be deployed, and then I'll show you how you're going to be able to stand up your own private repository and connect it to that, and then be able to deploy the apps. Now that section you'll only have to run once, and then you'll be able to, every single app that you guys have created, you'll be able to install it and deploy it to your private app host repository. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yep, no problem. All right, so now that this is run and it has created that container, we're going to go ahead and want to run the container itself. So we're going to run the command docker run -v for verbose. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to supply it a config. Now, the only thing that I have realized is for instance, for the resilience one here, or for the relations one here. So I'm going to supply it this app config to allow it to put that app in, there we go. I'm going to supply it this app config so that it gets these settings that it needs, right? Um, but the the logs, because I'm building this on a Windows system, I built it out this way so that I'm literally telling it, hey, this is where I want you to store the logs. But when I pass this over to the log file over here, or when I pass over to the Docker container, this is not running Windows, obviously, so this is not a valid path. So I do have to come back in here and make a quick edit. Um, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go ahead and make a copy of this file. And this will now be my file that I use for the container. But we'll go ahead and erase this. We'll call this temp. All right, so we're going to call this /temp so that we don't have any problems trying to deploy this. And that should be the only thing you need to change back from running this in a Windows environment versus running this in a Docker container, which is ultimately running in Red Hat. So what we're going to want to do here is we're actually going to define where that file is that I just created. Let me just copy that so that I get it right the first time. So we're going to paste that in here. Now, after you grab that file and pay, or that file location and paste it in here, this will not run properly. You actually will have to come back through here and change all of these to forward slashes for this to work. And that's just because of the way that Docker is expecting this. So after you type in the file location for your config file, then we're going to tell it what we want to associate to that config file. So the way that we do that is by typing in etc and then res circuits and then app.config. So we're defining this is where the app config file lives in the Docker, and the other and the beginning of that before the colon is saying this is where it lives on my system. So I want to associate this live file with this file that we're going to build out in the container so that this is where you're going to get your settings from. From there, we're going to go ahead and type in the resilience relations. So this is going to be the tag that we made. We're then going to define the actual instance here that we're wanting to run. And so here we'll type in that because that's the container that we want this to run in. So from there, we can go ahead and hit run or hit enter to run this. And as you can see, this is now running. So at this point, we can actually go back, and this is now a running app that we have within the Docker, our Docker container here. So we can actually come back in here now and say, for instance, I wanted to take this one here and move some things around here. Okay, so we're going to go to 2096, and we're going to go ahead and come in here and say that this, oh, have I not? And there it is. So we want to assign this this to a parent. So we're going to go ahead and kick that off, and we're going to go ahead and say that this 2095 is the parent. And when I hit this, you'll be able to see all that code start executing over here. Maybe. Come on, don't make me a liar. There's a problem here. Oh, there's an error. Oh, of course. All right. So as I'm trying to show you this, of course, I had an error as well loading this. Not entirely sure what that is, and I don't really have time to troubleshoot it for this demo purpose. But over here, you should be able to, basically, this is now running your resilient circuits with your app in it. So you can actually do all of your testing from here now. And, obviously there's an error here. So we go back in here and try to determine what that error is. We can figure that out and start moving on. So for now, what I'm going to go ahead and do, and I'm just going to go ahead and kill this. So there we go. Finally got that cleared up. All right. But let's say that worked, because I don't know why it didn't work. And let's say, okay, we've now tested our container, or we've tested it in both the integration form and now within a container. So now what we're going to want to do is we're going to dive into the preparing this for actual publication, right? So the first step we need to do is actually run the Docgen, which is essentially building out the documentation for this. So it won't fill out all of the documentation for you. You'll have to go in and finalize that documentation, but you can run resilient. Actually, let's jump back over to my other one so I'm not overwriting anything. So for instance, here we're going to go with resilience SDK, and we're going to go docgen. And then I believe you have to add package. Yeah. All right. So it created this documentation here. So now what we'll do is we'll come back over here and jump into the app. And then you see this documentation here, right? So we're going to go into here, and you see the screenshots. So this is where all your screenshots are going to lie. Now, if you go into, I believe it's this README file here. Yep. Instance. So now we've got this here. So now this is going to be our documentation in a .md format. So you can come down through and it'll explain here for you that you need to go through here, and anything that's got this change me, you'll need to manually edit. So you can come down through and you can see things like, okay, right here, I need to erase this entire section and apply my notes. So this is the version, this is the date, um, so this is actually saying this entire thing you need to do. So you come in here, you set your date, you set your initial release, or if you've got additional notes, so maybe this isn't the initial release, but you've added new functionality or something like that. You can add that down here, and it'll add a different, you can add a different version and everything for each iteration of this. You can come down through, and here's where your screenshots are. So it describes this is where your screenshots are saved. So as I showed you here in this doc folder and in screenshots, this is where that main image is. So you can add screenshots to your documentation doing this here. So again, key features, you can come down through here. It'll show you pretty much everything that you need to change, and it'll show you everything that's, the installation process and everything. So this is all built out for you automatically. Of course, I always build out another document for myself, just with more description of how the product works and everything. But that's completely up to you on how you do that. This, I think, is the minimum that we actually require. So next step, after we have gone ahead and created the documentation, laid that out, built that all out, and we're good to go, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to actually package it up again for the final packaging. So essentially, this will be the exact same command that we ran before. But now, because we've created the documentation and everything, it'll actually include in those distribution files the documentation as well. And if we made any changes to code, of course, it'll update that and add that all in. So we'll go ahead and run this again. It'll go through. Again, if you've got any errors or anything like that, you could do that. You can also run this with the -- validate, which will give you additional information. I think this might take a little while to run though with the -- validate because it's doing a bunch of testing, so I'm not going to run that currently. When you do the -- validate, you will actually get an output file. So I think it's in the relations here. So, okay, I don't have it in this one. Well, I do have it in wider one here. So you get this validate report that you can also submit on behalf of, or when you're submitting it to us, and that will actually give you give the guys who actually verify your package is ready to be uploaded to the Exchange server. It'll give them that information so that they can go through and do some additional checking to make sure that everything is validated properly and that nothing needs changed on your guys' end before that we upload it on our end. So that's like I said, that's the stuff that I don't have documented currently. I need to finish my documentation on that before I can get all that done. But I'll touch on that. Or I wanted to touch on that real quick here. All right. So now we've got the distribution file here. What we need to do at this point is we need to actually push this into a push this file that we or this app that we've got here up to the cloud or wherever our registry is. So the registry I use for my personal stuff is GitHub. So I use GitHub's container repository. You guys may use, I think you mentioned GitLab. So you've got GitLab going on there. There's plenty of other repositories that you can use. I think the IBM owned one is Quay.io. So you can use that one as well. But essentially, this is going to be the same process for all of them. First off, now that we've got the container built and we are ready to actually deploy this officially, what we would want to do is we're going to use the Docker command to log in to our container repository. So for my instance here, it's going to be container repository.io. And then I'm going to provide it a user, which is, all right. So type in here, we'll type in my username, and then we'll go ahead and hit enter. It's going to ask for my password to that GitHub container registry, which I can. All right, login succeeded. Sweet. So we're going to go ahead and log in here. Now I am logged into my GitHub container repository, or whatever repository you want to use. But essentially, you're going to use the base login here. You're not going to want to use the so technically with GitHub container repository, you type in it's like GitHub container repository.io/muma is where all of my containers are. So you just log into the base URL here, and then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to tag this again, but tag it for the push to the cloud. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Docker tag resilience, and then fn test app, and then give it a version number again, 00. Oh, this might not work because I don't think I actually built an app for this. All right, let me try over here, and I'll rerun my. All right, so now what I'm going to do is now I'll run that command that I started to build out for the tagging. And we're going to do fn relations, and then of course the version number of this one. So if you've got multiple versions, you can specify which version specifically you want to upload. And then from here, we're going to do the container registry path. So now there's a default path that has to be added for IBM packaging. And that's sort of true, sort of not. I'll go into it later. But for our own registry, the way that I always lay mine out is I do the GitHub container repository.io / and in GitHub's container repository, all of mine are going to be located in my file name here. So this may be different for the container registry that you're using, but for mine, we'll have to define it there like that. And then in here, we'll call it IBM Resilient, and then we'll do another / and then the package name. So this is going to be the FN relations. And then we're going to do a colon, and of course, we need to add the version number here as well. So we'll add this here, and this will tag it for us. Now, after we've tagged it, now we're going to push this up and into our container registry. So the next command we're going to run is docker push, and then the registry path again, which is going to be what we just typed in up top there, the GitHub container registry, MUMA, IBM Resilience, and FN Relations. And then we're going to supply it that version number. And this is the full command to push. We'll go ahead and hit enter. And this may take a little bit of time, but at the same time, it may not, because I think this should already be in my container registry. So it looks like I may have changed something, because this is now pushing properly. But essentially at this point now it's pushing those hash values up there. So when you actually connect it to the container registry, it knows, okay, I'm going to go out here, I'm going to check this to make sure that the hash values are same, so that there's nothing, I can verify that nothing has been changed on the app that I am about to run. So that way, this is where we add our security, where I can say, okay, there is, there's no way that anybody has altered this function or this integration here at this point to allow it to run on or to upgrade or to change it, I'll say, to add any kind of malicious functionality that will then run in my environment. Yeah, and so this is just to push it to the container. This only has to be done when you are finished actually doing the development. None of this is going to have to happen to be able to use the integration later on. You just have to do this once the development itself is finished.
Got it. And of course, you'd have to do it again for when you update.
Exactly. Whenever you've added any updates, you can do this again. But then say the version changed. So say, okay, we finalized this one. This one is good to go. But later down the road, we find, oh, hey, we want to add some additional functionality, or we want to do some patching for some errors that we found. Okay, we'll go ahead and update this, and we'll actually make this version 1.0.2. And then we'll go ahead and we'll push this again up to the push this up to our container registry as a different version. That way we can still install version 1 if we want to, but now we can also install version 2, and those are two different separate apps themselves.
Separate app. Okay. Okay. So you can have the old version and the new version.
Yep, exactly.
Cool.
So depend. What's that?
I would just continue. I was going to ask an additional question, but continue.
Okay, I was just going to say, yeah, that will be dependent completely on how you're building yours out. So if you've already got one that you think is in good working order and you're going to go ahead and run it, that can be your version 1 versus we want to add additional functionality. That could be version 1.1, and then a bug fix could be 1.1.2 or something like that. So you can decide how you want to do your versioning, but then each one of those, every time you push it up, is going to be its own separate app. So you don't have to overwrite previous apps that are in your container registry.
Cool. So overall, it seems like okay, when we go through the process of, um, you know, actually building the code and generating a package, and that turns into the zip file. That goes into resilient, and then you still have to turn around and, you know, build a Docker container. But then you push that to the container repository, and
Yep,
then once you're ready to finally push the app that's in resilient down into the app host, that's when you make the connection because the container, the file hashes and all that fun stuff are already in the registry. So it just finishes the
correct.
installation and then runs the app.
Yep, I'll let this finish in the background. But as we move forward, the next step, now that we've pushed this to our container registry, the next step is we have to set up our app host to listen to that container registry or to interact with that container registry to pull down the hashes that we're wanting to verify that these apps haven't changed or anything like that. So what we would actually do for that, and I think I got it pulled up here already. We're going to log into our app host. So this is my app host for this demo environment. And what we will do is we're going to run the sudo manage app host. And then we're going to go to the registry and set the registry. And then we're going to say the registry is equal to, and for this instance, we're going to do the GitHub container registry.io. And then it's going to ask for that username as well. So we're going to say username or user, and then we're going to give it the username. So in this instance, my username was Muma, so I will give it Muma. Now, this one, first, it's going to ask for my password for my app host itself. So I'll enter that in, and then what it's going to pop up and ask me for is the password for my registry. So here it's asking me for the registry password. So then after you enter that password and hit enter, it will go down through and finalize the configuration. And then at this point, you are good to go. You've actually defined your registry, and this app host is listening to the registry that we want it to be listening to. So you do have to do this step. If you are having problems with this, it may be because you have not actually gone into the apps and actually paired them. You do have to have these paired before you can tell it which registry to listen to. So after you've done that, then you can actually come back over here and you'll see that I've got two applications or two app host servers in here. I've got the IBM app host. And so now this is for anything that is IBM published. So this is listening to their container registry. And then I've got private apps. This is my app host that's listening to my container registry. So now, if I wanted to push something such as this CVE search, this was pulled down from our Exchange server. So this is an IBM published app. So I can go ahead and push this over to this app host, no problems. Now that this is finished pushing over here, what I should be able to do, hopefully, fingers crossed, no problems, come into here, and we'll actually go ahead and be able to define this app. Oh, sorry. Before I do that, missed one step. Do I have it documented too? Yes, I do. So I just missed it completely. All right. So the container registries, where I went in here and here it is. So I went in here and I actually defined that this container registry is this, right? But I told you that the GitHub container repository actually sets it at, this is where all of my files are actually located. Well, if I try to install this app that I've got here, that for this one, FN Relations app, it's going to tell me that it's unable to find the registry for it, because essentially where this is actually going to be looking is there. It's going to be looking in this file right here for it, or this pathway for the container. So what we need to do is we need to actually redefine where this is going to look. Now, the way that I've tried in the past is actually by going up here and changing this so that this command is essentially doing this, right? Except for this won't work within AppHost. It does not, it will not take this this URI at the end of it. It only takes the default location. So where you actually define that is in the app itself, and I go into the distribution file. So in here, we're going to go ahead and open this in 7-zip. And in the app.json file, what we're going to want to do is, so we're going to open up that that app.json file here, and in here is where it's going to have all of the information about the app. Now, if you come down to the current installation section of this JSON and you find executables, and you will find image. So this is where the image is actually stored. Now, what you'll notice is you'll see that this is what it'll look like. It'll look like the IBM Resilience and then FN Relations 1.0.1. Now, as I said, though, we can't define the app host to look in our specific file or into a specific file. So what we would actually be doing here is we'll come in and we'll just go ahead and add the // in front of it. And then, like I said before, I put this into the same structure as before, where it's going to be IBM Resilience and then the app that we have. So this is where we're defining where that where the app host should actually go take a look for where this file is located. So after you do that, you'll be able to go ahead and save and then close. That's essentially where you would want to go in and you would want to change that. You would want to go in and change that to the add your path for your container registry so that it is stored in the exact location that you need it to be stored in, or that it is actually stored in, so that the app host knows where to look. Is there any questions on that? Because I know that can get confusing.
Nope. Well, the only question is that app.json file only produced after we package it, or is it somewhere else? Okay.
Yeah, it's only in there. It packages it up and puts it into this file. So you would just come in here and edit that app.json file.
Okay. That makes sense then.
So now that we've updated this zip file with the correct location, now, if you haven't already, we should be able to add or install this file, either remove the old one that you were testing with, or you can install, if you've done any changes, you'll have to add it again. But come in here and add it again now that you've changed the JSON file and everything. And now we can actually go into here and edit our app config, which in this case, I don't have an app config or don't have any config specifically for this app. So we can actually just go ahead and tell it, okay, I want you to deploy this as a private app, and hit deploy. And hopefully, fingers crossed, this will go through without any problems.
How did you get the CPU uses to show up on your app hosts?
So that is 100% dependent on your version. So the version of my SOAR instance is 44. So I'm on the 44 version. I think that we introduced that on 43. So you've got to be at least version 43. And then the app host version is 1.8 for this one. I think it might have been introduced on 1.7, but definitely 44 and 1.8. That's how you'll get the CPU usage on there.
Is it an automatic thing? Because I know since we're a SaaS, you guys are managing it. You guys update it, and I'm like 40. We're 44.2.32, and a little while ago I did actually update the app host to like 1.8. Yeah, 1.8.1.373.
Huh. So I'm not sure if there's any difference in SaaS. You might have to contact whoever your contact is for your SaaS stuff and figure out why it's not showing up. But in my environment here, I didn't have to do anything special. As soon as they associated with each other, it started pulling that information from the app host.
Got it. Noted. Thanks.
Yep. So as we can see here, the app has now deployed to the private app host that I have here. So that is essentially how you build an app and customize your apps and stuff like that to be deployed within an app host. At this point, I think that covers everything that I have to cover. Other than, I guess I can dive into this section too. If you are wanting to publish an app that you have built here, you'll come out to the App Exchange. You'll go to the login section here. All right, now that I'm logged in, we can see that I have a submission portal option down below the filter section here. So we'll click on that. And I'll probably have one that is, yep, rejected here. This is one that I'm currently working on. I just haven't had time to dive in any further and resolve problems. But you can just go ahead and hit the Add New Community app here and start entering in your information. So for instance, if this is your first version, this could be FN test app, and version number is going to be 1.0.0. And then the product that we're working with here is SOAR. And you can hit submit. It'll ask you a bunch of information, including documentation, stuff like that. I can actually resubmit. Yeah, there it is. Okay, so you'll be brought to this section here where it'll ask you for information on the application itself. You'll upload the extension file. You'll add, your basic details, including your long description and your short description here. It'll ask for documentation. This is where I normally create my own PDF files to add information in here. And then from there, you can come in here and go into tags. So define, where your content type is, define what your what your tags are actually going to be for this product here. And then if you built this for AppHost, I know that they will send it back to you if you do not come in and add an AppHost tag here. And that allows for, in the searching mechanism, when you click AppHost, or if you search AppHost, it will bring up, so I come into here and I just search AppHost, and I go to SOAR. Oh, just doesn't like that I got this stretched out. All right, so this is all of the integrations that run on AppHost that are for SOAR that are also running on AppHost. So that's how you can tell, oh, okay, these are the ones that I can deploy directly to my AppHost environment. So I know that they will send that to you. And then you can just come down, add your images and stuff like that. And yeah, if you have a marketing video that you created for it, you can do that. add in any information. And then as you can see in this one, for instance, after I defined all this and sent it to them, I had some issues with it. So they're sending me back with, hey, we need these things resolved and any notes that they provided. So that's how that'll happen. So they'll send it back to you and reject it. And you can come in here, you can look at why they rejected it, what their notes are. You can go in and do any remediations for those. And then after you do that, you can go ahead and resubmit it. And that comes down to the submission page down here. You can just hit submit for review and it'll send it off there. It's not letting me hit it right now because I still have some unresolved things here. So, but once I've got all those things resolved, this option will be available. You hit that and it'll push it out, and then you'll have your first app published. Or, well, it'll be in queue once they publish it, then it'll be published.